So the title of this talk is Get Some Rest. But then I realized I really should have titled it I Need Some Rest, because I really do. My name is Rich Manalang. I'm a developer advocate. I'm a newly minted Atlassian, about 4 weeks into it. This is the end of my 4th week, so bear with me. If there are things that, when you ask questions at the end, bear with me. And, Matt Quayle is here also to help me out. During the talk, I would like if you guys could ask questions through Twitter. That would be great. And the hashtag is JIRA rest, and I'll show you a little bit later why that is. And actually, before, I totally forgot to start this up. Let me just do this real quick. And all right. There you go. So JIRA rest, or you can just do AtlasCamp, and the best tweets will get a prize. So trying to make it interactive. So who am I? From a developer context, I am kind of a geek. I started off coding on this little machine here, Timex Sinclair 10,000. I don't know how many people have heard of that. Awesome. Yeah, it had the best keyboard. It was like this, like those waterproof puffy keyboards. It was like this big. You had to have really tiny fingers. You hook it up to your television. There's a video game switch on the back, and you have to switch it on, turn the volume down, because otherwise you hear all this crazy RF noise. And then you record your programs on a cassette tape and play it back to get it back. That's awesome. So that hooked me, and ever since I've been writing code and all kinds of stuff. In college I learned Ada, which is kind of weird. I don't know if anyone here knows Ada, but like when I went to school, there wasn't Java, and we learned Ada. And when I got my first job, it was the weirdest thing. I was writing COBOL for HP 3000s, which is, it was weird. And what's weird about that was the web was really kind of getting popular. My tail end of college, the Mosaic and Netscape, all that was popping up. And then I get out of college and I'm writing COBOL. So, over toward the end there, I'm going toward the web stack, if you will. I'm a self-proclaimed Rubyist, JavaScripter guy. So I'm not much of a Java guy, but I do all kinds of other things. So why am I talking about that? It's not really talk about programming languages, but one thing I wanted to everyone in this room probably has at some point touched many languages, and everyone here probably programs in many different languages, I'm sure of. Anyone know of these languages, Kilix or Oberon? Oh yeah, so cool. I've never heard of them, but yeah. The thing is, whether or not you know it, you're a polyglot. Everyone here knows many languages and probably uses them in different ways. But as web developers or people who build applications on the web, whether you're actually building in a browser or not, you're using web technologies. And regardless of the language or framework you're using, there are common things, right? I mean, everyone's on the same transport layer, HTTP, everyone's talking XML, JSON, and everyone is using the same patterns for authentication, authorization, UI patterns, algorithms. It's all the same thing, right? Once you've got some experience with those. And from a language exchange, of the data exchange side, we are familiar with REST and SOAP. Those are predominantly the most popular ones, with REST becoming even more popular. Well, speaking of frameworks, you guys have heard of Ruby on Rails, right? Has anyone ever tried COBOL on cogs? Yeah? It's awesome. Great. So anyway, I'm not going to talk about any more programming language or anything like that. What's going on with JIRA 5 REST APIs? You guys have heard a lot throughout the past 2 days. And I'm actually quite happy about that, because that means I don't have to dive into too many details. I get to show you more of the fun stuff. So what's changed? So my first week here, this is really hard to see, but on the left, you see basically the endpoints for JIRA 4's REST APIs. On the right, 5. And this is a diff of the changes. It doesn't look like much, but I assure you, there are a lot of things. And the main things that have changed is around the CRUD ability for issues. So you have full access to being able to create, update, read, and delete issues through a standard REST interface. So what's nice about that is that, you know, before in JIRA 4 you could read issues, but you couldn't update them. So it's kind of frustrating. It's like you're halfway there. You could do all kinds of stuff. You could build a read-only interface to JIRA, right? But you can't do anything useful with it. So with JIRA 5, that's being fixed. And if you've downloaded the SDK, you can actually install the beta 1 and start playing around with it. Other thing, major change is when you search for an issue, you actually get back issues. You don't get IDs back. You know, we actually display the entire payload of what's in the issue, and you can pare this down to like just what fields you want, or you can even display everything, custom fields down to the metadata of the fields. So more, yeah, you could filter things, you can get the metadata, and we've talked a little bit this week. Matt talked about remote issue links, and I'll show you a little bit about what that really is. And other goodies you should know about in the REST API. Our REST API by default talks in JSON. So you submit a request, gets or puts anything, you're going to get a JSON representation back by default, which is important to know because, you know, sometimes people forget to send the actual accepts header, and they're expecting XML or something. By default, we send back JSON. We also can send back JSON-P. How many people know about JSON-P? Okay, fair number of you. JSON-P is great because, you know, it allows you to build really simple integrations. Like if you want to, you know, write a piece of JavaScript that you can drop on a website and show some issues, or come up with something like a, you know, a little mini feedback form that you can drop on your website, you can do that through JSON-P. And we also obviously talk XML. The nice thing about the REST API is we provide a lot of hypermedia inside of the actual structure of our REST response. So what does that mean? So the hypermedia links basically allow you to do things like if you look up a project, for instance, the project will have all kinds of information about issue types and components and versions. And there are going to be what are called self-links in there, which are additional URIs that you can go after in your client, in your application, to get in more information about those. And so our responses are peppered with all kinds of hypermedia inside of the entities, so you can go after and get more information about the actual response. The API is versioned. We kind of get that for free with Jersey. So, you know, in the future, when we release enhancements to the API, we will attach a new version on the URL, and you can still use the previous version. If you just do a /latest, you'll get the latest API. Some other things that are really nice, we provide caching support. The REST API is smart about caching. So if you issue an expires header, we will go out and get the actual issue. Of course, your client has to be smart enough to understand expire headers. And the nice thing about expire headers, it works the same way as like in browsers. You know, if you're trying to build an app, you don't want it to be too chatty on the network. You want to use a client or build a client that actually understands caching headers. And Ben Waska talked about the REST API. I'm not going to talk about the REST API too much, but that's another new API inside of JIRA 5 that's there. So let's go through some demos. And I'll preface this demo is that the API, the JIRA 5 is still a work in progress. So this applies. So if you're browsing through REST APIs, oh, there's some tweets coming in. Great. All right. So, what's everyone's favorite tool, right? curl. That's probably the best, well, I wouldn't say the best way to interact with REST APIs. I'll show you some better tools, but most people know curl, right? And you go through this dance of accessing curl, doing a lot of typing in the terminal, and you have to be really good at doing it while you're talking. Let's see here. Let's access projects. This is what you would get. It's pretty ugly. You can't really see, really understand that. But, after doing this for a while, you learn better tools. Python has a really cool JSON tool that if you just pipe the output of that to a JSON tool, it formats it. And you can even get more fancy. You can colorize it with pigmentize. Yeah, that's if you're a curl person. I'm not a curl person. So I have a better tool called HTTP Console. How many people have heard of HTTP Console? Awesome, a few people. Okay. So HTTP Console. First thing, I'm going to use JSON, so I want it to send. There's some issues right now with some of or when you post and puts, it doesn't really understand sending JSON unless you actually explicitly say your JSON. So I'm just going to say JSON, and I'm going to just do basic auth because it's easy. And I'm running on a local. So this is cool because you could just go JIRA REST API 2, right? And that'll change. It's kind of like a directory, right? You guys see that, by the way? So if I just want to do a get, I'll do the same thing for projects. I get that, which is kind of nice because it's all colorized and I can inspect it. Let's look at search. You could do a query parameter for JQL, and we'll just do project equals camp. It's coming back with a whole bunch of stuff, so what you could do is you could limit it, pare it down to max results equals 1. That's still pretty big for a screen, so we're just going to add another query parameter for, I talked about you could filter the fields that you get back, right? So the way you would do that, you would just put a field query parameter and just specify the field. So if you just want the summary back, well, let's see if this works. Oh, I think I have to say fields. Whoops. I'm just going to type it again. And I only have one project in here, so I'll just do this. Max results equals 1, and fields equals summary. So there you go. So you can just say, oh, I want just a summary. It's a comma separated, so you could just say, I also want description. And you get description. And you can also do another thing that's called expands. We have an expansion query parameter, which is pretty nice. Allows you to expand certain things, like if you want an HTML escaped representation of the description and summary, you can just say expand HTML. Yeah, that worked. So, oh, maybe that's a bug. But yeah, the description should be, oh, actually, no, I don't have a description on this particular issue, but if there was one, it would be escaped and ready to put into your browser right away. So that's the, a basic way. If I wanted to create an issue, I could just do a post against issue. And the nice thing about this tool is it's waiting for entry. So I'm just going to copy something I have in text edit and just drop that in. And that will just go ahead and create an issue. And this is the response I would get back, which is a self-link to the actual issue. If I access that, I will get the actual issue back. So if I just do get issue camp 1531, there's the actual issue data that I just submitted. So one thing that's nice about this is, as you can see, it's very easy. It's not like playing with soap or anything. It's the responses are pretty small, and it's pretty easy to kind of understand and play with. And it's going to get easier too. So show you that toward the end here. So just real quickly about authentication. Mark did a good job talking about our OAuth support. One of the things that I specifically wanted to show was if you're building an app. By the way, another nice thing about REST APIs is you don't have to build plugins. If you could use the REST API and build an app in another framework or language outside of Java, and use our REST API just like you would use anyone else's REST API. There's no ramp-up time to try and learn like a plugin infrastructure. Or I know most of you guys know plugins, but for those that don't, this is a great way to build external applications that live and breathe on their own outside of the JIRA infrastructure. So how would you do that? We provide authentication support, and basically we support basic auth. We support basically anything that is supported on JIRA itself. So even session cookies, you could go through and use session cookies to authenticate to the REST API. But I wouldn't do that if I were you. The best way to do authentication with the REST API is to use OAuth. And I put up some examples out on Bitbucket. You can go out here and you don't have to write down these URLs, but there's some examples in here on how to do what's called a three-legged OAuth. A three-legged OAuth is basically the OAuth dance that Mark alluded to. How many people know about the OAuth dance? So if you use like Facebook or Twitter and have had to like access an app or something, you get asked like, would you like to allow this app to have access to your information? That's the OAuth dance. And let me just show you that real quick. Like here's a really simple Ruby Sinatra-based example that I have. This is the one that's posted in Bitbucket that basically will take you through an OAuth dance. So this is my app. This is a Sinatra Ruby app. It's not Java. When I click the sign-in link, that's going to initiate the dance. And in this case, it knows that it's tied to JIRA, my local instance. I'll sign in. And what's going to happen now is you're going to get this thing called request for access. You guys are probably familiar with a similar sort of page that you get from like a Facebook or a Twitter or some other consumer-based app that uses OAuth. Approve the request, and there it is. And now I get this what's called an access token. Once I have this access token and the secret, I persist that in my application. With that token, I can make requests on behalf of that user anytime. It doesn't have to be in the browser. It could be a service underneath somewhere. It's a really good tool for being able to build applications without asking your users for a username and password. So yeah, so we support that in actually it's there in JIRA 4 as well. So again, like here's just a really basic flow, the OAuth dance again. The main thing you want to from this is when you're doing OAuth, there are plenty of libraries out there, practically in every language that you care about. Get one of those libraries, Google for the best one, and just use it because the version of OAuth we support is 1.0a. And 1.0a of OAuth is actually pretty complicated. It's complicated because you have to sign every request you make to the REST endpoints. And signing that request is not that trivial unless you're using a library. OAuth 2, which is in draft right now as a spec, will be, I'm guessing it's going to be due out sometime this year, finalized this year. And that simplifies things a lot. So hopefully we'll adopt OAuth 2 at some point in the near future. But the main thing to get out of OAuth is that to start the dance, you have what's called a request. You have to go out and get a request token from the provider. So you send a request over to the provider, request for a request token. What you're going to get back is you're going to get a request token and a request secret. And then what you do is you make another call to send that back to authorize that token. Once you're authorized, you get back what's called an access token and access token secret. You persist those in your application, and like I said, once you have that, you can make calls on behalf of that user anytime. It's not session-based or anything like that. So with regards to OAuth, we have, this is very fresh, very new. We have some examples out on developer@Atlassian.com. There's a bunch of REST API tutorials in here, but there's one dedicated to OAuth and basic auth. So and there's also some code samples in here, some jar files that you can play with. So definitely check that out. I think that's going to be useful if you're building any sort of remote-based application accessing our REST APIs. The nice thing about all this stuff, REST and OAuth, is you're going to encounter that pretty much everyone who's doing REST APIs these days is doing the same thing. So you learn it once and you're done. You know, we're not doing anything special than everyone else out there. So, and basic authentication, I'm not even going to talk about because I think that's pretty basic. And you guys could Google that if you need some help on that. I think, you know, the big part about talking about REST APIs, it's not so much the APIs themselves. I think the APIs are important, and the functionality in APIs are important. But to me, as a developer, what's more important is having the right tools to make me productive. So if you've never played with REST APIs before, it's really, really important that you use the right tools, that you discover the right tools to use. And so there are a bunch of things that you can use in your toolbox which screen am I on? There you go. You could use. So like one of the things I use on Chrome, I'm a Chrome user, there's an extension called REST Console. So if you like to do things on the browser, you can use this, and let me just point it to ours, and I'll show you what it looks like. So it works pretty much the same way as if you were using curl or some other command line tool. It's a little bit nicer on the eyes if you're just doing it in the browser. Some people like to just, you know, sometimes some people just like to use the inspector and start issuing jQuery requests from here, right? So there's many ways to interact with REST APIs. A few other tools that I like to use, the HTTP console, I showed you that earlier. But another thing that we're experimenting with, let me just show you some things that I've been spending a lot of time on since I started, is looking at how people are documenting their REST APIs. And documentation's great, but really what we would like to do is provide more interactive documentation. So we've been looking at some of the best practices people are coming up with out there. Dropbox is a really good REST API documentation, and it's very descriptive. It shows you, you know, everything you basically need to know, like the endpoints, what the URL structures look like, versions, you know, methods it supports and stuff like that. I think, you know, there's other ones out there that are better. Campaign Monitor is another one that's really good. It's a little bit more visual, and you know, we're hoping that you know, whatever whatever documentation we come up with is going to be a lot more visuals and showing you how to set up the application links and the OAuth consumer and all of that. So we've been looking a lot at different kinds of documentation sites. Here's a different take on it. This isn't really documentation. This is more of a console. There's a company called Apigee, and it's like a hosted. They're like a hosted API service, and you can have your API hosted there. You know, they do Facebook, Twitter, and basically a bunch of different companies. And then the cool thing about this is that, you know, you have all the services described here on the left, and you can go in and execute those and see what they look like. But the problem is, again, there's no documentation here. This is like the opposite extreme. You can play with it, but you can't really see what's going on. Google does something that's really nice. Also, you know, Google has this API Explorer, which basically allows you to select, you know, any one of their number of services that allow you to access APIs from, and it's totally dynamic. Like they just released a couple of weeks ago the Google Plus API, and you can go in here and basically access the API interactively. I'm not logged in here, but basically you can go in here and you'll see a request response, very similar to what I was showing you with the other ones. They also have this thing, which is pretty cool. It's a code playground that describes all the APIs that they have out there, and you can play with it, right? And the difference is that they have all kinds of code wrappers around their APIs. So like some of them, they have JavaScript, they have Ruby, Python, and so this is more like executing stuff. Not as like HTTP calls. This is executing actual code in the browser. And then last night, I found out about Stripe. It's a new service that came out yesterday, and they have this really cool documentation. So this is where it becomes more like, you know, documentation mixed with actual code content. And you know, you can go in here and see the documentation on the left with the examples here on the right. You can do, you know, whatever flavor. If you want Perl, Ruby, Python, PHP, you can get the actual code that's needed to describe that. Still, again, the problem with this, it's mostly documentation. It shows you code, but not interactive enough. Here's what we're doing. So right now, in part of the beta request that's out there, we have AutoGen doc that gets published at this URL up here, doc@atlassian.com, JIRA. And you can go out there and basically access this documentation and see all of the REST points, or the endpoints, what the payloads look like, and all of that. It's a good start. It's not where we want to go. What we want to do is take that and marry it with something that's more interactive. So here's a prototype I'm working on right now of something that's a lot more interactive. So I took the output of this. There's a Waddle file that gets generated from this, which describes basically all the endpoints and the resources. I took that and converted it into something that I could use to generate interactive docs from. So like if I wanted to do a search up here, say project equals camp, and just go ahead and try it. There's you get your response headers and your response body. This is very helpful because it allows you to play with the APIs a lot better than just going through curl. And the description is inlined along with the parameters. You can do that right now with, you know, things like issues. Like, say I want to create an issue. Well, when you're creating an issue, you get a payload, right? You have to submit a JSON body, right? So if you try this, it'll show you the call to the actual URL, the response headers, and the body. So very useful. Hopefully this will be useful to you guys. Our plan right now is to try and package this up in two ways. We want to have this as a part of our developer Atlassian.com documentation. But we also would like to create a plugin that you can just drop into your application, into your JIRA instance, and have it scan all the REST endpoints that are available in your system, including REST endpoints that you guys may have created and extended, and have it automatically generate this interactive doc. And hopefully that will be useful. So let's see here. So we talked about that. Last thing I want to talk about today is kind of providing some inspiration for new kinds of apps you can build where there are REST APIs. You guys are plugin mavens. You guys have built lots of plugins and know everything there is about plugins. You know a lot more than I do about plugins. But what we would really like to see more of is people using the REST APIs and building something completely new. Because if you think about it, the REST APIs is going to be kind of a big part of things like our hosted solutions, right? I mean, if we get to a point where we actually have remote plugins, and the REST API is going to be a huge part of that. Well, so what can you do with the REST API? I was just doing a Google search for ultimate wallboards, and I know we had a wallboard competition. But this is one I found that looked really cool. There's a company called Red Ant, I think in Australia, that has this wallboard. So you could build a wallboard with our REST APIs without actually making a plugin, right? You can build like a standalone wallboard in whatever technology you want. That's one example. Another example, mobile apps. Who here builds mobile apps? Okay, we got a few people in the room that builds mobile apps. It's a huge opportunity. Before Atlassian, I was working at Oracle, and there were a ton of little mobile projects going on in the company because it's a big deal. People people want to have mobile apps in the enterprise. So I think it's going to be an even bigger deal for companies like Atlassian to have a mobile presence. So it's a huge opportunity. If you haven't done any mobile apps, built any mobile apps, it's a good thing to learn. We released JIRA Issue Collector sometime, I think this week or last week. Well, that's great. If you want to create issues, it's great. But what if you wanted to create a kind of like a Get Satisfaction style feedback app? Drop it into your website, and you wanted to be able to collect ideas, questions, whatever you want. It doesn't have to be issues, right? I mean, we've been spending a lot of time talking about issues, but because of the REST APIs, you could start using JIRA for all kinds of other things that aren't issue related, right? Extending JIRA out to other places, like Chrome, right? Second day on the job, I built a Chrome extension for our Confluence instance internally so I can see my activities and stuff and post my update and all that, just because I didn't want to have to go into the website every time. I could just go in there. And it turned out to be pretty useful to a lot of people. So, scratch an itch. It's really easy to create extensions on browsers. And you can post it out on Google's web store, and it's an actual web store. You can charge money for it, right? And, here's another idea I was thinking, gaming is big, right? Anyone here written games before? Okay, a few people. So, you guys have heard about the Angry Nerds campaign last year, and Julian wrote JIRA Hero. That was pretty cool, where he basically injected a game layer on top of JIRA. Two great tastes. It tastes better together. What if, for Angry Nerds 2, someone built an Angry Nerds 2 inside of JIRA? Okay, stretching it. But yeah, so just to show you some of these examples, just stuff that I was playing around with. Let's see. So, we talked about mobile apps. One of the things that I was playing with was I was playing with the APIs, and for me, a true test to like good APIs is being able to write applications off of it. It's, you know, a lot of times there's a lot of software companies who create REST APIs for the sake of creating APIs, right? And without an actual use case for it. So I wanted to build applications on this and to try it out and see if it actually works. You validate your idea, right? Same stuff with Don was talking about the other day. So I actually created a little Atlas camping here. This is using jQuery mobile. And this is the sessions from the camp are actually loaded in there as issues with an issue type of sessions. And you can go in there and get details about the sessions. And you can vote on them. And it actually uses the voting system in JIRA. And you can add comments. So, and the nice thing about this is it uses the standard OAuth dance that I was talking about earlier. One thing we do need to fix is we need to make sure that these login screens are mobile friendly. But other than that, you get the same sort of OAuth dance that you would get if you were on the web. Oh, in the background here, this is just to prove to you that these are actual REST calls that are going against the API. I have it logging the actual request and response. These are pretty large, but you could see everything that's happening on the HTTP layer when I make a request from this app. So these two issues, by the way, were the ones I created earlier. So that's not really supposed to be in there. But so now, like if I wanted to, like, say, vote on my own session, I get a 1 there. I can add comments. And this is all feeding back into JIRA through the REST API. Right? And so it's a great, you know, like if you wanted to build some sort of app that either is issue related or non-issue related, you could use the APIs for that, right? So here's my little comment down there. So that's one example of stuff. It's interesting. And just to prove to you that it is going into JIRA, we'll actually go into my JIRA instance and see those things. So there's the comment right there that I just posted. And, oh yeah, you guys are submitting questions. So all your tweets are, you know, I can't talk about REST APIs without actually including Twitter into it because they've got probably one of the most popular REST APIs around. So all of those tweets that you guys are pumping out are being streamed directly to my console because I'm using Twitter streaming API. It's a real-time API. And it highlights basically anything with JIRA REST in it. It's using their search API. It does a filter. And it also has a little I call it the JIRA bot. Currently tracking JIRA REST. So someone submit like a tweet. It'll just show up on here. And then as it's pumping it through there, it's also pumping it into my JIRA instance. So let's look at your questions. So let's see the tweets here. Actually, I actually have a better way to see these tweets. I also created a speakeasy extension that allows me to look at all the tweets you guys are putting in. There you go. So yeah, so that's another use case for using the REST APIs. So you saw all the stuff that was shown yesterday about Speakeasy. You saw Mike's demo of using the REST APIs in combination with Speakeasy. This is, you know, you could totally extend the functionality of JIRA using the REST APIs and Speakeasy. So that's a way to use it. So let's look at these questions. So, whoops, just disappeared. Oh, there you go. Oh, nice. Yeah, hey, I'm pretty good about that. Nice. It worked. Yes. All right. Let's see. Any questions here? All right. Nice with the REST API docs. Yeah. If you guys have any comments or thoughts about our REST API docs, it's the stuff that we're thinking about. It's we haven't officially kicked off a project. It's kind of more like a personal project that I'm trying to do to improve the to create an interactive documentation. Come to me afterwards and let me know what we can do. When is the interactive REST API doc app getting released? Yeah, that's a good question. Oh, that's another interesting question. Is another interesting use case, one thing that you guys could do and help out the community. So we have REST APIs. A lot of people who have REST APIs have wrappers around those in different languages. So if someone wants to create a Java one, open source it and let everyone know. And that would be great. That would be super helpful to everyone. And it doesn't have to be Java. It could be whatever, right? Well, I'm not going to look through all of this. It looks like you guys put a lot in there. If someone just wants to ask questions, go ahead, raise your hand. And we'll go through it. This is kind of fun. I didn't think anyone was going to put much stuff in it. It's pretty cool. Oh, another thing that's kind of fun I added in here is I was talking about adding games into JIRA. So what's cool is if I don't like one, so all I need is a leaderboard. So maybe we can hook this up with JIRA Hero. So yeah, so that's the talk. If anyone has any questions about anything, please let me know.